Hi, everyone, and welcome to the weekly Dharma gathering. My name is Gail Spiva. Tonight's session will be led by Bhante Sumano and is entitled Remembering and Reconnecting. Bhante will lead us through a guided meditation, Dharma talk, and we'll close with a Q&A discussion. Tonight's session will be recorded, so if you prefer not to be seen, please turn off your camera feature. Please note that you'll be recorded when asking a question. The recording of tonight's gathering can be accessed within 48 hours via your purchased products on your Vimeo Weekly Dharma Gathering account. You'll receive an email notification once it's posted. And a little introduction for tonight's speaker. Bhante Sumano is a Buddhist monk. Rather than adhering to one tradition of Buddhism, he prefers to seek the essence of the practice present in all traditions. Seeing that Buddhism is ultimately a practice of the heart, Bhante Sumano is most interested in exploring the liberating wisdom of ancient and contemporary masters. You can find more information on his website at https://monks.moonspec.net. And Bhante, please teach us.
Thank you for the introduction. So tonight I'll be talking a little bit about the topic remembering and reconnecting. There's a lot to be said about that topic, but to begin, I would just like you to think of just internally, really, just within yourself, what's alive for you at this moment. So just bring to mind in your heart, how are you currently feeling? What is pressing? What is tugging? What is calling for your attention? And it doesn't have to be something necessarily out there, but even just what's popping up in your experience, whether it's your experience of the physical body, whether it's your mental experience, emotional experience. Just give some room to think about that for a couple moments and acknowledge it. Acknowledge that that's what you're entering this space with in this moment, even as you're listening or prepared to listen. And whatever that thing that's come up is, you can just acknowledge it. It's like, oh, I see that. You're there. And we don't necessarily have to do anything about it right now, but just acknowledging it does a whole lot. So I wanted to begin the session with some chanting, actually. And chanting is a practice that's common in several Buddhist traditions to varying degrees. But I know that in certain circles or settings, it doesn't always get that much of a spotlight, especially as something that one can do for themselves on their own, in a group, or in whatever kind of setting, as an activity of reconnecting, as an activity of remembering, grounding, and getting in touch with some of the more embodied or visceral qualities of the practice. So the chant that I'd like to share is a chant on loving kindness. And it's in the Pali language, which is the language of the discourses or the suttas generally used in the Theravada tradition. And I invite you, if you don't already know it, to just listen with an open heart, open mind, and see what the experience of listening to that brings up in you. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Arahang samma sambuddho bhagava buddhang bhagavantang abhivademi. Swakato bhagavata dhammo dhammang namasami. Supatipanno bhagavato sāvaka sangho sanghang namami. Andamayang metta paranang karomase. Ahang sukito homi. Niduko homi. Awero homi. Abhyapadjo homi. Anigo homi. Sukhi atanang pariharami. Sabe sata sukita hontu. Sabe sata awera hontu. Sabe sata abhyapadja hontu. Sabe sata aniga hontu. Sabe sata sukhi atanang pariharantu. Sabe sata sabbadukkha pamucchantu. Sabe sata latta sampatito ma vigachantu. Sabe sata kammasaka kammadayada kammayoni kammabandhu kammapatisarana. Yang kammang karisanti kalyanang wa papakang watasadaya da bhavisanti. And so that chant was basically a chant of well-wishing. So may I be happy, be safe, be free, and may all beings as well experience the same safety, happiness, joy, and freedom. So I figured I would offer some guided meditation after that. You can find a comfortable position, whether you're seated in a chair or on a cushion. Maybe you're in bed. Maybe you're at the office on break somewhere. But wherever you are, just take a moment to find a stable, upright posture. With your feet and legs comfortably rested on a flat surface, if possible. With your back upright, but not too rigid. You might roll your shoulders back just a little bit to tense, but then relax them. Relax your neck, jaw. And if it feels right, you can close your eyes or leave them slightly open, but cast downward in front of you. And just begin by coming back to your breath. Taking a deep breath in, a deep breath out, maybe another couple deep breaths. Before going back to a natural breathing, whether that's shorter than you'd like or longer than you'd like, just letting the breath be however it is. You can use that as an anchor, whether noticing the breath entering the nose, the mere sensation or feeling of it, or you can use some bodily sensation to ground yourself. Maybe the feeling of your palms resting on top of each other, or your feeling of the thighs or legs against a seat or cushion, or even just an experience of the whole body. And just be with that for a couple of moments. Now I invite you to bring up an image or a thought of something or someone that brings you joy or happiness. Maybe the image of a calming or beautiful scenery, a place that makes you feel at peace. Maybe a friend or a loved one looking at you with a smile, kind eyes, maybe remembering a very joyful and heartwarming moment, a beloved animal, or even just holding in mind a phrase or a word like care, kindness, compassion. And let that be something that you hold for yourself or experience for yourself. Whatever feeling of lightness that may come up, or peace, serenity, imagine that you're letting that embrace you, hold you like a little bird safe in a warm nest, feeling cared for, feeling loved. Again, just take a couple moments to experience that as it arises, in whatever way it arises for you. And if you do have a feeling or sensation, just letting the lightness of it or the ease of it, let that spread through the whole body. Allow yourself to rest in that feeling. And just see what it's like to either see yourself or to imagine how someone else might see you with eyes of compassion and care. Just allow the body to rest in stillness if it can. In the stillness of peace, kindness, and serenity. And eventually, if you can, let go of whatever image or phrase or word you were bringing up to experience that feeling, and just be with the feeling if possible. Be with the breath, be with the body, be with that energy of kindness. And as we're about to end the meditation, and do so slowly, maybe taking a couple intentional breaths. As you relax your posture, open the eyes gently. And maybe stretch if you need to. And allow yourself to come back to the space after the meditation. So good to see everyone, including some familiar faces. And like I'd said at the beginning, the session or the talk is based on this idea of remembering and reconnecting. And as a friend pointed out, there's a dash in the remembering. And that was intentional, in the sense of thinking of remembering both in the sense of recollecting, so keeping something in mind or remembering something, but also in the sense of bringing back together. So the same could be done for the word recollect, to recollect, to bring something back together. And particularly, I was thinking about this in the context of being in a chaotic world or being in a hectic environment where oftentimes we might feel pulled in so many directions. We have our hands on the keyboard and our ear to our family, or mind is on something else, someone else, somewhere else. Especially nowadays with our relationship to work and home, it's all getting sort of intertwined to the point where sometimes I've heard people describe there is almost no difference now. They carry their work in their pockets. They carry school in the palm of their hand. And this can have the effect of feeling like we're very disconnected from not just our bodies and our minds, but even just from this sense of who we are, what are we doing, what is the point. Sometimes it can be very alienating. And I'm a big fan of memes often. So I like to share this one in particular, and it's very to the point. It's just existing can be exhausting. And memes have a way of just capturing with a visual and very few words sort of this common feeling that people might be having at any moment. And that's why we kind of think of it as a meme, something that's repeated or recurring in the lives of many people. And especially nowadays, facing and having faced so much of the coronavirus pandemic, a lot of people are exhausted. That can, manifest itself in different ways, whether it's exhausting being away from work, sort of dealing with the emotional labor of uncertainty and anxiety around making an income and supporting oneself, or even having work, but it being now, say, online or sporadic or unpredictable, chaotic, being with family more often than many people have probably been used to in the past. So navigating new relationship dynamics and all of these things, again, can leave us feeling quite worn. But like I mentioned in the introduction, or at least at the very beginning, a way to start addressing this within ourselves is simply by acknowledging that that's the case. And so I like that meme in particular. Existence is exhausting because, yeah, it is exhausting. Yeah, I am feeling stressed out. Yeah, I am feeling torn. Yeah, I am feeling disconnected. And with that, then the possibility for doing something about it, if there is something to be done, opens up. And in a traditional way, this is part of the practice of Buddhism's Four Noble Truths. The first noble truth is just acknowledging that there is pain, there is suffering, there is discomfort, there is dis-ease with something or someone or ourselves or all three or any combination. But then when we recognize that, then we can start to dig a bit deeper. But that recognition, of course, is sometimes very hard fought, very hard one. And it can be painful even to recognize that we're experiencing pain or experiencing something difficult. But as the Four Noble Truths point out, and as I would say is just born from our own experience, it's impossible to get through a difficulty or challenge without recognizing it. Uh, Otherwise, we end up suppressing or ignoring something that's there and acting or pretending as if that's not the case. And that's not useful. That doesn't actually solve our problem. There's a famous Zen master, Thich Nhat Hanh, who recently passed. He would liken this activity of acknowledging and also not acknowledging pain to taking care of a broken oven that's smoking. So if we have our oven in our kitchen and it's not working quite right, we set it to preheat and it starts smoking and belting out toxic gases. If we just close the lid and say, oh, we're not going to deal with that, the smoke's gone, everything's fine, eventually it gets to a point where the stove may even catch on fire. It will become a worse problem than the one we initially started out with, simply because we ignored it. We didn't want to look at it. We didn't address the issue. Might also be that it doesn't necessarily catch on fire or anything bad happens, but the next time we want to use the stove, it's still broken. It still needs fixing. And so similarly in our life, we might find ourselves caught in certain patterns or habits or situations that if we don't address them, they just keep coming up again. On the other hand, if we recognize that the oven isn't working and it's belting out smoke, then we're like, oh, that stove, there's something wrong with that stove and that needs fixing. And then we can figure out what to do with it. Sometimes that means we might have to rely on someone else, a technician. Sometimes it means we already ourselves have the knowledge to address the issue. But regardless of whatever action comes, it starts with an acknowledgement. So that practice, the first one of thinking or acknowledging what's alive for us, is one form of acknowledgement. And I would say that chanting is another form of acknowledgement. So I shared that chant on loving kindness, and I can just drop the link into the chat, which also has the translation. That chant itself, in the actual doing of the chant, this is something that I feel personally, I've heard other people feel it. There's something that just happens in the body, in your experience of the body and the mind, of holding yourself. Holding yourself with words, with melody, depending on the kind of chant, even with music. And in that holding is just an acknowledgement that there's stuff in here that is difficult to bear on our own, stuff that hasn't yet been solved or that hasn't yet been transformed. And so in the act of chanting, it's like entering into this space where we're preparing our mind and our body to hold that, to acknowledge that. And then sitting meditation, again, can also be another practice. In particular, this evening anyway, I shared a form of loving kindness meditation that I like to also pair with compassion sometimes. And again, it's giving ourselves the space to hold just us, just this body and this mind, without judgment, without the burden of expecting ourselves to be this way or that. Can we just be with ourselves and see ourselves with kindness, with care, with compassion, the way someone who really loved us might look at us, the way that a pet or an animal who just loves us for the sake of loving us might see us. And in doing that, again, we're not expecting ourselves to be fixed, to be solved, to be perfect, to be anything really except present. And if we can be present for ourselves in that way, then we can allow ourselves to have this container to look at whatever it is that needs to be looked at, that's sort of bubbling beneath the surface. There's a story discourse in the Pali Canon, which is a set of Buddhist texts. And one of them is about a turtle. So the Buddha is talking about a turtle or a tortoise, depending on the translation. That's just like going out and about in the world, kind of recklessly, kind of happy-go-lucky. And a jackal comes along. This is ancient India. So a jackal comes along and sees this tortoise and is like, that is dinner. That is exactly what I need. And if the tortoise isn't perceptive and doesn't realize this, then the jackal will simply attack it and rip it apart. It'll grab its legs, its head, it'll tear it to shreds if it doesn't pull inwards, if it doesn't protect itself, because tortoises and turtles aren't very fast. So if they've already sort of ended up in this pretty dangerous situation, all they can do is pull inwards. That's what their shell is for. And in the same way, in the story, the Buddha likens it to people going about their lives or going through the world sort of unaware and exposed to everything that's pulling them in all these different directions. Traditionally, this is all the different sights, sounds, tastes, smells, and sensations that just yank us in every direction. Stuff that we're disgusted by and stuff that we're enticed by, this cycle of just want, or not wanting, not wanting, not wanting. But we can also take that in a metaphorical sense and apply it to any experience that sort of tugs on us and weighs on us. That if it gets to a certain point, it is like having our limbs ripped off. And so sometimes what's needed in a given situation is to withdraw and to pull in. And it's not in the way that we might liken an ostrich sticking its head in the ground, but rather this is stepping back and stepping away so that acknowledgement and healing can be done. A tortoise and a turtle eventually comes out of its shell when danger passes. And it also doesn't necessarily keep putting itself in harm's way. It figures out what needs to be done in order to survive. And similarly, for us in our own personal lives or in each of our individual ways, we need to figure out those ways that we can find the space and time to acknowledge what's going on, to remember in that sense, to come back to ourselves, and also to pull in if we need to, whether it's by doing a chant, whether it's by sitting in meditation, whether it's by going for a walk, being with ourselves so that we can see what exactly is going on and what needs to be done. And then from that, we start the work of reconnecting, which is the other part of what I wanted to talk about. And reconnecting, again, in that sense of putting things that were separated back together. so that we can start to feel whole again. And some of those practices of acknowledgement allow us to do that. Sometimes they're a package deal. Sometimes just saying or seeing, oh, this is a lot, already does so much to relieve some of the burden, relieve some of the stress. But sometimes there is, something extra or more that needs to be done. But I liked using this word reconnecting in the double sense of reconnecting, but also in terms of plugging back into community or into relationship, because those are the things that will help us sort of sustain the healing that we're trying to accomplish. So it's almost, I think anyway, at least in the circles that I move in, a cliche that it's known that the Buddha talks about spiritual friendship as the utmost, the highest. It's not how long you can sit for. It's not how much you can stand being in the lotus position. It's not how much you've studied. It's not how much you've heard or read or done. But what's the quality of your friendships? What's the quality of your relationships? Because this path is impossible to do by oneself. And so if we don't have a good friend or two or three or however many around to support us, then it's very difficult to sustain the kind of healing or reconnecting or remembering that we're trying to do. And that's not only because, but at the very minimum, it's simply because we need someone, I think anyway, to tell us we're not crazy. We're not alone. We're not somehow weird or odd for feeling like we're struggling, for getting on the wagon, being a little successful, and then falling off the wagon, for making a little bit of progress and then backpedaling or falling backwards or feeling burnt out even. We need someone who can be like, oh, no, that's actually pretty normal. Someone who can see whatever challenges we're working with and then accept who we are and what we're dealing with anyway. And if we have that, then it makes tackling those difficulties so much easier. And then it makes celebrating our victories also much more meaningful and much more delightful. And of course, it's just always good to have somebody you can lean on, someone you can laugh with, someone you can trust. And for a practitioner, this doesn't have to mean someone who is in your meditation group or in your community or who's doing your Buddhist practice with you. It can be anybody really who can support you in whatever way you might need. But I wouldn't discount or shy away from those connections because they are integral to success in navigating all the different challenges that we have. It's been an interesting time because I mentioned that Thich Nhat Hanh passed away, and my monk friend and I were fortunate enough to be at a Plum Village monastery, which is a monastery in the tradition of Thich Nhat Hanh, during his memorial services. And the energy and feelings of grief were palpable. I mean, of course they were. These were monastics and lay friends and practitioners who had all been touched by Thich Nhat Hanh's work and life to one degree or another, and people who really felt a heartfelt connection with him, myself included, who now had to experience this moment of transition and loss. And that energy was there in the air, but also was the energy of support and caring, the energy of gratitude for one another, and also for not taking the fact that there were other people around still who could be relied upon. And it was really beautiful to see people relying on each other in that way. So, of course, there was sadness and, of course, there was pain, but to be able to uh, hold that feeling and emotion that's so heavy was much more possible being in a community of other people. So I would call that a practice of reconnecting. It's not as tangible as, say, sitting for a few minutes or doing this meditation method or doing this chant, but it is just as crucial, if not even more crucial, to find ways to create and be a part of a community. And I use community in the broadest sense. Again, 1, 2, 3, or more people. And then the other practice that I wanted to share was one that is actually used in the Plum Village tradition. And it's the practice of touching the earth. And this is a practice that when I first encountered it, was very deep and meaningful for me. It was described to me as a practice of just unburdening whatever we're carrying to the earth, um, letting ourselves make contact with the earth and letting go. Letting the earth, which is so vast and so great, sort of hold all of the pain and suffering that we might be going through. And in doing that, also recognizing that we could do it, that we can do it, that we have strength, we have resilience, and that we can sort of lean on that recognition that for the most part, unless we're flying 24/7, we're always connected to the earth, whether by walking, lying down, etc. And then using that also to feel connected to whomever or whatever we wanted to be connected to, whether it's our ancestors, our communities, our homeland, our spiritual teachers. It's a practice of coming back to ourselves again. And so traditionally, this is taught as just taking a moment in a clear space to bring the palms together, then to bring them to the head, and then to get down, if you do yoga, basically into child's pose with your feet, knees, and hands touching the ground, with your forehead on the ground between your hands. And just even silently, just being in that position, also called a prostration, for a few moments and just breathing and seeing what that's like. But there's also some texts, and I'll give the link to that as well, that can be practiced with. And I just wanted to share one of them. And it was one that came to me really, I would describe it as serendipity, basically, because it just came to me as like, whoa, I really needed to hear that. And I'll read it out loud, and maybe you can just listen and take it in. So this is recited while bowing down to the earth. And it says, touching the earth, in gratitude and compassion, I bow down and transmit my energy to those I love. All the energy I have received, I now want to transmit to my father, my mother, everyone I love, all who have suffered and worried because of me and for my sake. I know I have not been mindful in my daily life, and I also know that those who love me have had their own difficulties. They have suffered because they were not lucky enough to have an environment that encouraged their full development. I transmit my energy to my mother, my father, my brothers, my sisters, my beloved ones, my partners, my daughters, my sons, my children, so that their pain will be relieved and so that they can smile and feel the joy of being alive. I want all of them to be healthy and joyful. And I know that when they are happy, I will also be happy. I will try to no longer feel resentment towards any of them. Even though I know they may have been unlucky, never having had the chance to be cared for and loved. Life and society have dealt them many hardships. They have been wronged and abused, and they have wronged me and even people I love. Still, I pray that all ancestors in my blood and spiritual families will focus their energies towards each of them to protect them and support them. I know that I am not separate from them. I am one with those I love. And then in the practice, you would take a few deep breaths, just letting that resonate. And then there'd be a bell, and then you would stand up and just stand with your palms together again, just for a moment. So that's also a practice that I would recommend or consider as part of this process of remembering and reconnecting. Sort of see those things that we're holding on to and find a way to move through them. And of course, this process takes care and takes time. But it's one that is necessary if we're going to feel whole, if we're going to feel reconnected, if we're going to feel like we're not just sprawled out in all directions, being yanked apart by life. So there is a final meme, if I can pull it up here, that I don't have the picture for it, but I'll just read it out loud. That I think just captures sort of the essence of the practice. And it's basically whatever challenges that we're experiencing, it's a practice basically of being with it. So that's the first line. Then dealing with it, healing from it, and then letting it go. But this process has to happen sort of in that order, acknowledging, seeing where these things are coming from, seeing what can be done about it, doing something about it, and then being able to process it, let it go, metabolize it, transform it. So I think I will end there for the talk, and thank you all for your attention. So at this time, I would open it up for any thoughts, questions, comments, anything really. Open time for people.
Thank you. I found you.
Yes.
Serendipity. Like when I saw the date, I said, February the 9th. is it tonight? And so I found myself here, and your talk and referencing really hit home on some key areas for me. And I too have come upon the touching the earth to those who have made me suffer and those who I love. And I truly love reading the script and the passage. And I know that on the app of Plum Village, there is a touching the earth that a monastic read this out. So I thought I should do with this. And then tonight, you're reminding me that this is what I had wanted to do. So it's perfect. But I have a question about the 4 steps. And you were going to show the meme, but you talk about it. Can you say those again? First one is obviously acknowledging.
Yes. So acknowledging,
Mhm.
dealing with. So
Dealing with. Okay.
dealing with it. Then healing,
Okay.
and then letting go.
Can dealing with be on my own without having to interface with the source of suffering?
It can be, yeah. So it makes me think of, oftentimes, and I think this is sometimes something people struggle with, is, can we reconcile something with perhaps another person who may have either passed away or who, for whatever reason, it's not healthy to interact with physically or even just verbally or by other means. It's definitely more difficult, I would say, but it can be done. It's something that can be done internally if we're able to sort of get to the heart of why that difficulty is there. It might be something that we need the help of another practitioner or mentor, teacher, or guide to do with us, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the person that we're trying to resolve the challenge with, I would say. Mhm.
I meant to say thank you very much.
Yes, yes. So, Gail, I don't know. I'll leave it up to you how you'd like to go about the end.
Okay. Just move this. So I guess that yeah, we could go ahead and wrap up. I have a few announcements or at least a little script about what's going on. So I'd like to thank everybody. And thank you, especially Bhante, for your teachings. I very much appreciated them. So thank you for joining us for tonight's online Dharma gathering. Please join us next week for the weekly Dharma gathering taking place Wednesday, February 15th, when Dr. Shante Paradigm Smalls will offer a talk entitled Reclaiming Sangha. I'm looking forward to that personally. Just some plugs for weekly Dharma gathering. Please consider becoming a subscriber if you're not already. We have a 7-day free trial and you can find on our website. Please tell your friends. In addition, make sure to follow us on Instagram at Weekly Dharma and on Facebook at Weekly Dharma Gathering. So thanks Bhante and Luan. I do appreciate this evening with you.
Thank you.
All right.
And good to see you, Luan.
Yes, it is good to be back with you, Bhante Sumano. My greetings to Bhante Tara. And be well. And I look forward to meeting again with Weekly Dharma Gathering if it works out. Take good care. Good
All right,
night.
take care.
Okay, thank you. Good night.